Ladies and gentlemen, I got rich the moment I understood this one truth, and it had nothing to do with luck, talent, or even hard work. Because let me tell you, money doesn't change your life. Your mindset does. The day I stopped chasing dollars and started mastering the psychology that attracts them, everything shifted. Most people think wealth is about what you do, but the reality is it's about who you become. And once you get this, once you truly grasp it, you'll never look at success the same way again. And I got rich when I understood this. Wealth isn't about money, it's about psychology. It's not about what you have in your bank account, but the state of mind that drives your actions, your decisions, and ultimately the results you create in your life. Most people think getting rich is about luck, being in the right place at the right time, or having some genius level intelligence. But the truth is, abundance is unlocked the moment you take control of your own internal world. When I understood that my outer reality was nothing but a reflection of my inner beliefs, everything shifted. And think about it. Every decision you've ever made about money, about opportunities, about risk, about relationships came from your internal programming. If that programming was filled with scarcity, fear, and doubt, then even if money touched your hands, it slipped away. But when you rewire that programming, when you shift from scarcity to abundance, from fear to certainty, from limitation to possibility, that's when everything changes. And the truth is, money is a magnifier. It doesn't change who you are. It amplifies who you already are. If you're insecure and fearful, money will make you more insecure and fearful. If you're generous, disciplined, and abundant, money will flow to you and expand those qualities. I got rich when I understood that wealth starts in the mind long before it shows up in the wallet. And I started asking myself, what's the difference between people who stay stuck and those who break free? It's not intelligence. It's not education. It's not even hard work, because plenty of people work themselves to exhaustion and never get ahead. The difference is leverage. The rich understand how to use time, energy, and money in a way that multiplies. They don't trade hours for dollars forever. They look for vehicles that can grow without their constant presence. They understand that building wealth is about creating value at scale. And you cannot create value at scale if you're trapped in small thinking. And here's what most people don't realize. Money follows value. If you can solve a problem for one person, that's good. But if you can solve a problem for 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 people, money has no choice but to find its way to you. Wealth is simply the byproduct of the value you contribute. And here's the kicker. You won't even step into that level of contribution until you believe you're capable of it. That's why mindset is everything. And I used to think I had to wait until I had more resources, more money, more connections to create something great. Then I realized resources are never the issue. Resourcefulness is. When you become resourceful, when you refuse to quit, when you decide you'll find a way no matter what, doors start opening. You see opportunities others are blind to. You hear possibilities and conversations others dismiss. You create momentum, and momentum compounds. And I got rich when I stopped focusing on what I didn't have and started focusing on what I could give. Because here's the paradox. The more you give, the more you receive. Not in some mystical, abstract way, but in reality. When you pour into others, they pour back into you. When you solve people's problems, they reward you. When you show up with energy, passion, and certainty, people want to be around you, to work with you, to partner with you. Wealth is built on relationships, and relationships are built on trust, energy, and contribution. And most people live their lives reacting. They wake up, check their phone, scroll through social media, worry about bills, stress over work, and hope something changes. But nothing changes until you change. Wealth is not accidental, it's intentional. It's the result of rituals, habits, and standards you refuse to compromise. You can tell me what you value, but I'll know what you truly value by looking at your daily routines. If you spend your time consuming, escaping, and waiting, you'll stay stuck. If you spend your time creating, learning, growing, and contributing, wealth becomes inevitable. And there came a moment where I decided I will not settle for average. I will not accept a life of survival. I will not trade my dreams for a paycheck. That decision was everything. Because wealth begins the moment you raise your standards. The moment you demand more from yourself than anyone else could expect, that's the moment life begins to match that demand. And fear kept me poor for years. Fear of failing, fear of judgment, fear of losing what little I had. But the second I realized that the real risk was playing small, everything shifted. Staying safe was actually the most dangerous thing I could do, because safety meant stagnation. Safety meant never tapping into my potential. Safety meant living a life of regret. And regret is far more painful than failure. Failure teaches, grows, and strengthens you. Regret suffocates you slowly. I got rich when I stopped letting fear drive my decisions. And here's the reality. Money doesn't flow to need, it flows to certainty. When you show up with absolute conviction that you can deliver, people feel it. Confidence is magnetic. When you walk into a room with certainty, people lean in. Opportunities open, deals are made, leaders emerge, and that certainty doesn't come from pretending. It comes from preparation, from pushing yourself, in comfort, from doing the work no one else is willing to do. And you want to be rich? Stop asking, what do I get? And start asking, who do I need to become? Because wealth is attracted to character. Discipline, integrity, consistency, resilience. These are the traits that create abundance. If you can't manage $1,000, you'll never manage $1 million. If you can't lead yourself, you'll never lead a business. If you can't stay committed in the dark, you'll never shine in the light. And I got rich when I learned that emotions are the ultimate currency. You can have all the strategies in the world, but if fear controls you, you'll hesitate. If doubt runs you, you'll sabotage yourself. If anger consumes you, you'll burn bridges. But when you master your emotional state, when you can generate energy, focus, joy, and resilience at will, you become unstoppable, because the game of life is 80% psychology and 20% mechanics. And the truth is, the strategy to get rich isn't complicated. Save, invest, create value, multiply, repeat. But the reason most people never get there is because they don't have the psychology to follow through. They quit when it gets hard. They shrink when it feels uncertain. They play small because it feels safer. The rich aren't smarter. They're just more committed, more resilient, more willing to act in spite of fear. And I got rich when I realized life pays you whatever you demand of it. If you demand survival, you'll get survival. If you demand abundance, you'll get abundance. But the demand has to come not just from your lips, but from your heart, your actions, your relentless consistency. Wealth responds to certainty, persistence, and vision. And here's the final piece I understood. Being rich isn't about money at all. Money is just a tool, a symbol, a scorecard. Real wealth is freedom. Freedom to do what you want, when you want, with who you want. And freedom to live on your terms. Freedom to create, contribute, and expand without limits. That's the real prize. And you only get there when you master the inner game, when you refuse to settle, and when you decide that your life will be a reflection of your highest potential, not your deepest fears. And when I understood this, I realized wealth was never just about accumulating. It was about becoming the kind of person who can hold, expand, and multiply what comes into their hands. Too many people chase money, but money runs away from those who chase it out of desperation. It flows to those who attract it through their vision, their certainty, and their ability to create massive value. The real question isn't how much money you want to make, but how much value you're willing to give, how much growth you're willing to embrace, and how much discomfort you're willing to endure in the pursuit of something greater. And I started to see that wealth is created in moments of decision. A single decision can redirect your entire destiny. You may not control the wind, but you absolutely control the sail. And most people never adjust their sails. They drift, waiting for conditions to change. But those who become wealthy understand that conditions are never perfect. They create momentum anyway. They act when it's uncomfortable. They move when others hesitate. They invest when others retreat. That's why they get ahead. And I got rich when I understood that problems are not obstacles. They are opportunities in disguise. The bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the reward. People often complain about problems, but problems are the very thing that shape leaders, that build wealth, that forge greatness. If you want more income, stop running from problems and start running toward them, because your income is directly proportional to the size of the problems you're willing to take on. Most people settle for solving $10 problems, and they wonder why they only have $10 in their pocket. If you want to step into real wealth, you must develop the capacity to solve $10,000, $100,000, and $1 million problems. And I discovered that your identity is the thermostat of your life. No matter what happens on the outside, you will always return to the level of your identity. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you'll sabotage anything that looks like abundance. If you see yourself as someone capable, deserving, and resourceful, you'll rise to that level. The moment you upgrade your identity, your actions align, your standards rise, and your results follow. That's why some lottery winners go broke in a few years. They didn't raise their identity, they only raised their bank account. And because your identity always pulls you back to where you believe you belong, they end up right where they started. Wealth is identity. And I also realized that focus is power. Whatever you focus on expands. If you focus on lack, you'll live in lack. If you focus on opportunity, you'll create opportunity. Most people spend their energy focusing on what's missing, what's wrong, what's broken, and then they wonder why they feel stuck. Wealthy people discipline their focus. They don't ignore problems, but they don't obsess over them either. They condition themselves to focus on solutions, growth, and what they can control. That kind of focus creates momentum, and momentum is the ultimate force of wealth creation. And I got rich when I stopped making excuses. Excuses keep people broke. The moment you justify why you don't have enough, why you can't start, why the timing isn't right, you chain yourself to mediocrity. Wealthy people take responsibility, complete, unshakable responsibility. They don't blame the economy, their upbringing, or circumstances. They use those very challenges as fuel. They say, because I started with less, I will create more. Because I faced obstacles, and I am stronger. Because others quit, I will endure. That level of responsibility leaves no room for excuses. And when there are no excuses, only results remain. And discipline is the bridge between vision and reality. I realize that wanting wealth is easy. Everyone wants it, but being willing to do what it takes day after day, even when it's boring, even when no one's watching, that's the difference. Wealth doesn't come from intensity once in a while. It comes from consistency every single day. It's in how you manage your time, how you direct your focus, how you allocate your money, how you feed your mind. Small disciplines, repeated over time, create massive results. And then there's the power of environment. I got rich when I understood that your environment is stronger than your willpower. You cannot surround yourself with people who think small, complain, and settle, and expect to create extraordinary wealth. You will always adapt to the standards of the people around you. If you want to elevate your life, you must elevate your environment. You must surround yourself with people who push you, challenge you, and expand your vision, because proximity is power. If you spend enough time around people who are creating abundance, you'll begin to think, act, and decide at a higher level. And wealth also requires you to reframe failure. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of success. Every failure brings feedback, and feedback is the fastest way to grow. Poor people fear failure so much that they avoid action, and by avoiding action, they avoid success. The rich fail faster more often and with more intensity. They embrace the lessons, they adapt, and they move forward. Each failure sharpens their decision-making, builds their resilience, and sets them up for breakthroughs. And another thing I understood was leverage, the ability to achieve more with less effort. Wealthy people don't just work harder, they work smarter. They leverage systems, technology, people, and capital to create exponential growth. Most people live trapped in the cycle of trading time for money, but there's a limit to how many hours you can work. The rich create vehicles that produce income whether they're working or not. They build assets, they invest, they create systems that multiply their efforts. That's how freedom is created. And I got rich when I stopped living for instant gratification and started playing the long game. Most people trade their future for the comfort of today. They spend what they don't have, chase short-term pleasures, and sacrifice their vision for convenience. The wealthy understand the power of delayed gratification. They are willing to sacrifice now so they can live abundantly later. They plant seeds, water them, protect them, and wait for the harvest. And when the harvest comes, it's massive. And there's also the energy factor. Your energy is your greatest asset. Money follows energy. When you show up drained, doubtful, and uncertain, opportunities pass you by. But when you show up with energy, vitality, and enthusiasm, doors open. Energy creates influence, and influence creates opportunities. That's why your health matters, your mindset matters, your state matters. Because when you master your energy, you master your ability to create wealth. And I learned that clarity is power. You can't hit a target you can't see. Most people want to be rich, but they don't even know what that means for them. They have no clear vision, no specific target, no detailed plan, and without clarity, they drift. Wealthy people define exactly what they want, why they want it, and what it will give them. They set clear outcomes, and they condition themselves to see them as inevitable. When your mind has clarity, it creates certainty, and certainty drives action. And I also understood the law of compounding, not just in money, but in habits, knowledge, and growth. Wealth isn't built in a single moment. It's built over time through compounding. One book read may not change your life, but 100 books over 5 years will. One workout won't transform your body, but years of consistent exercise will. One investment won't make you wealthy, but decades of compounding will. The key is to start, to stay consistent, and to let time work for you instead of against you. And perhaps one of the most powerful shifts I made was changing my relationship with risk. I got rich when I realized risk isn't something to fear, it's something to manage. There is no reward without risk. Most people avoid risk, and by doing so, they avoid wealth. The wealthy embrace calculated risk. They study, prepare, and then act decisively. They know that the biggest risk of all is living a life of regret, never knowing what could have been because they were too afraid to try. And wealth requires vision, and vision requires courage. Courage to dream bigger than your current reality. Courage to step into the unknown. Courage to believe in yourself when no one else does. The wealthiest people in the world were once told their ideas wouldn't work, that they weren't capable, that they were aiming too high. But they had the courage to hold the vision, to act on it, and to persist until it became real. And finally, I understood that the greatest wealth is in contribution. Money by itself is meaningless, but money as a tool to create impact, to change lives, to uplift others, that's where true wealth lies. When you live for yourself alone, your vision is small. But when you live to serve, to give, to make a difference, your vision expands, your capacity grows, and your wealth multiplies. Contribution creates fulfillment, and fulfillment is the ultimate form of wealth. And I got rich when I realized that time is the most valuable currency of all. Money lost can always be regained, but time wasted is gone forever. The wealthy think differently about time. They don't trade it endlessly for small returns. They invest it in ideas, relationships, and growth that multiply. They understand that every hour is either compounding or decaying, and because of that awareness, they guard their time like treasure. I began to see that the way I managed my minutes would determine the quality of my years. Every distraction, every wasted moment on things that didn't move me closer to my vision was a silent thief of wealth. When I treated time as the sacred resource it truly is, my results exploded. And I started noticing that the people who live in scarcity often give their best energy to things that drain them instead of things that build them. They gossip, they complain, they indulge in negativity, and then wonder why their lives don't change. Wealthy people cut that out. They say no far more than they say yes, because every yes is a withdrawal from their account of time and energy. They only invest in what aligns with their highest vision, and because of that, their lives multiply in ways most people can't even comprehend. And I got rich when I understood that emotions drive behavior more than logic ever will. People buy based on emotion and justify with logic. Opportunities are seized, not when the numbers are perfect, but when the belief and passion are strong enough. If you want to create wealth, you must learn to master your emotions instead of letting your emotions master you. I saw that when fear ran me, I hesitated, I pulled back, I sabotaged. But when I generated certainty, gratitude, and courage, I took action that created breakthroughs. The wealthy learn to use emotions as fuel, not as shackles. And there's also something powerful about standards. Your wealth will never rise higher than the standards you set for yourself. Most people set their standards at survival. Enough to pay the bills, enough to get by, enough to stay comfortable. But wealthy people raise their standards to abundance, enough to invest, enough to grow, enough to create impact. The moment you raise your standards and refuse to settle for anything less, life begins to shift in your favor, because life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you tolerate. And I got rich when I realized that certainty doesn't come from the outside world, it's created from within, waiting for the market to be safe, waiting for approval. Waiting for everything to be lined up perfectly is why most people never move. Wealth is created by those who decide first and adjust along the way. They create certainty in their body, in their language, in their actions, and that certainty becomes contagious. People invest in those who radiate confidence. Opportunities flow to those who project belief. And belief, when backed by consistent action, has the power to move mountains. And I learned that money is a tool, not a master. Most people become slaves to money. They let it dictate their emotions, their decisions, their sense of worth. But wealthy people use money as a servant. They direct it, they command it, they multiply it. They don't hoard it out of fear or spend it recklessly out of impulse. They deploy it strategically, like soldiers in an army, each dollar sent out to bring back more. That shift from being controlled by money to controlling money was one of the most liberating realizations I ever had. And I got rich when I began to understand leverage at a deeper level. Wealthy people don't only leverage money, they leverage ideas, people, networks, systems, and even failures. They find ways to turn every resource into a multiplier. They know they don't need to have all the answers themselves. They surround themselves with people who are smarter, more skilled, and more experienced in certain areas. They build teams, they build partnerships, they create synergy, and that synergy compounds their impact far beyond what they could ever accomplish alone. And I started to see the undeniable link between growth and wealth. You can only grow your income as far as you grow yourself. If you want more money, you have to become more valuable. That means feeding your mind, stretching your skills, breaking through your fears, and continuously raising your capacity. The wealthy are lifelong students. They read voraciously, they attend trainings, they surround themselves with mentors. They're obsessed with growth because they know growth is the key to staying ahead in an ever-changing world. And I got rich when I realized that comfort is the enemy of wealth. Every time I chose comfort over growth, I paid the price later. Comfort keeps you small. It whispers that you've done enough, that you can take it easy, that you can wait until tomorrow. But tomorrow turns into years, and years turn into a lifetime of regret. The wealthy lean into discomfort. They embrace the hard conversations, the big risks, the long hours, the uncertain outcomes. They know discomfort is temporary, but the rewards it produces last a lifetime. And I also learned that true wealth is created by multiplying impact. Money is simply the echo of the value you put into the marketplace. If you impact one life, you'll earn one stream of income. If you impact thousands, your income multiplies accordingly. Wealthy people constantly ask, how can I serve more? How can I reach more? How can I solve bigger problems for more people? That shift in perspective unlocks exponential possibilities. And I got rich when I stopped waiting for permission. Too many people are waiting for someone to validate their worth, their ideas, their vision. They wait for approval from family, from society, from authority figures who don't understand their dream. But wealthy people give themselves permission. They decide, they act, they move forward regardless of who cheers or who doubts. And because they move, they create momentum. Because they create momentum, they build results. And because they build results, eventually everyone else recognizes what they already knew within themselves. And I realized that faith plays a massive role in wealth. Not just religious faith, but faith in the unseen, faith in your vision, faith that what you're working toward will eventually bear fruit. Without faith, you give up too soon. Without faith, you hesitate in the moments where action is required. But when you cultivate unwavering faith, you keep moving even when the evidence hasn't shown up yet. That persistence is what separates those who get rich from those who stay stuck. And I got rich when I understood the importance of gratitude. Gratitude may not seem like a wealth principle, but it is. Because when you're grateful for what you have, you attract more. Gratitude shifts your focus from scarcity to abundance, from what's missing to what's possible. And that shift changes your energy, and energy changes outcomes. The wealthy cultivate gratitude not because everything is perfect, but because gratitude multiplies everything it touches. And another key realization was that money doesn't respond to dabblers. Wealth rewards commitment. Most people dabble. They try a little of this, a little of that, but they never go all in. They never give their full energy, focus, and persistence to one thing long enough to break through. Wealthy people commit. They dig deep, they stick with it, they refine their craft, and because of that, they break through where others quit. And I got rich when I realized that generosity is one of the greatest wealth accelerators. When you give, whether it's your time, your energy, your resources, or your money, you create a flow. Money is meant to circulate, not stagnate. And when you give, you signal to yourself in the universe that you have more than enough. That mindset of abundance draws more abundance. Scarcity hoards, abundance shares. And those who live in abundance always find themselves with more to give. And I discovered that resilience is one of the most valuable assets you can build. Wealth doesn't come in a straight line. There will be setbacks, losses, and moments where it feels like everything is falling apart. But resilience allows you to rise again, to adapt, to keep moving. Wealthy people aren't those who never fail. They're those who never stay down. They find the lesson, they extract the wisdom, and they turn setbacks into comebacks. And I got rich when I understood that clarity of purpose fuels everything. When you know why you're building wealth, whether it's freedom, family, contribution, or legacy, every challenge becomes easier to endure. Purpose gives meaning to the struggle. It transforms obstacles into stepping stones. Without purpose, wealth is empty. With purpose, wealth becomes a tool to create a life of fulfillment, impact, and joy. And above all, I realize that the journey to wealth is a journey of becoming. It's not about chasing money. It's about becoming the kind of person who attracts it effortlessly. It's about developing the mindset, the habits, the resilience, the vision, and the character that make wealth inevitable. Money is the byproduct, not the prize. The real prize is who you become in the process. And I got rich when I realized that the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards execution. Everyone has ideas. Everyone has dreams. Everyone has something they believe could make them wealthy. But wealth doesn't come from ideas left in your head. It comes from ideas acted upon with relentless consistency. The marketplace doesn't pay you for what you could do. It pays you for what you actually deliver. That's why so many people stay stuck. They live in the land of someday. Someday they'll start that business. Someday they'll invest. Someday they'll step into their vision. But someday is a lie. There is no someday. There's only now. And the wealthy understand that. They act today, not tomorrow. They execute before they feel ready, and in doing so, they create opportunities most people only dream about. And I understood that analysis without action is the silent killer of wealth. So many people spend years studying, learning, preparing, but they never leap. They tell themselves they're waiting until they know enough, until the timing is right, until all the stars align. But waiting is the enemy of progress. Wealthy people learn while doing. They understand that failure is just feedback, and that every misstep teaches them something they could never learn by just sitting on the sidelines. You cannot steer a parked car. Movement is required. And once you move, you adjust, you pivot, you adapt until the path opens. And I got rich when I realized the importance of obsession. Not the kind of fleeting interest most people have, but a burning, unshakable obsession with a vision so strong it pulls you through the hard days. Wealth doesn't come from dabbling or from doing what's convenient. It comes from immersion, from living and breathing your craft, your mission, your purpose. When you're obsessed, discipline is no longer a chore, it's a byproduct. You don't have to push yourself constantly because your vision pulls you forward, and that obsession becomes magnetic. People can feel it and they want to follow, invest, and support someone who radiates that kind of passion, and I began to understand that money is neutral. It simply flows to those who understand its language. Most people attach emotions of fear, guilt, or shame to money, and that repels it. Wealthy people see money as a tool, a servant, a magnifier of who they already are. They don't worship it and they don't fear it. They respect it. They study it. They learn how it works, how it multiplies, how it can be leveraged to create freedom and impact. Once I stopped giving money all the power and started claiming the power within myself, money began to flow to me with greater ease. And I got rich when I understood that leadership is wealth. Wealthy people aren't just managers of money. They're leaders of vision, of people, of movements. Leadership is influence, and influence creates opportunities that money alone could never buy. If you can lead yourself, if you can master your emotions, your state, your decisions, then you can lead others. And when you lead others, you multiply your impact. Money follows leadership because leadership creates certainty, and certainty creates trust. And I discovered that risk and reward are not enemies, they are partners. Most people spend their lives avoiding risk, and in doing so, they avoid reward. They cling to the illusion of security, yet the very thing they cling to keeps them trapped. Wealthy people embrace risk, but they do it strategically. They don't gamble blindly, but they know that stepping into uncertainty is required for growth. They train themselves to become comfortable in discomfort, to make decisions with incomplete information, to move even when the outcome isn't guaranteed, because they understand that the real risk is not taking one. And I got rich when I realized that speed is a competitive advantage. The world moves fast, and wealth doesn't wait for those who hesitate. Wealthy people make decisions quickly, not recklessly, but with clarity and confidence. They trust their preparation, they trust their intuition, and they move while others are still debating. That speed creates momentum, and momentum compounds. While others are stuck analyzing, they are already adapting to the next phase. Wealth favors those who act with urgency. And I learned that you cannot outperform the story you tell yourself. If you tell yourself you're not good with money, you'll act in ways that prove it. If you tell yourself wealth is out of reach, you'll sabotage any attempt to create it. If you tell yourself success is only for others, you'll never step into it. The story you tell yourself is the blueprint for your reality. I began to rewrite my story to declare that I am capable, that I am resourceful, that I am worthy of abundance. And once that story became my truth, my actions aligned, and my reality followed. And I got rich when I realized that innovation is wealth. The world rewards those who find better, faster, more effective ways of solving problems. Wealthy people don't just copy, they innovate. They look at what's missing, at what could be improved, at what people truly need, and they create solutions. Innovation doesn't mean reinventing the wheel. It means looking at the world differently. It means asking better questions, challenging assumptions, and daring to step where others haven't. Innovation creates disruption, and disruption creates opportunity. And I started to see that resilience in the face of rejection is critical. Most people hear no a few times and give up. Wealthy people hear no 1,000 times and keep moving. They understand that every rejection is simply redirection, a step closer to the yes that matters. They build thick skin, not by avoiding rejection, but by embracing it, by realizing that rejection is part of the process. And the more no's they collect, the closer they are to the breakthroughs that change everything. And I got rich when I understood that discipline in the small things creates freedom in the big things. Most people think wealth is created in big, dramatic moments, but it's really built in the small, consistent disciplines that no one sees. How you manage your mornings, how you manage your money, how you feed your mind, how you treat your body, all of it compounds. Wealth is the result of thousands of small decisions stacked on top of each other, day after day, year after year. When you master the small, the big takes care of itself. And I realize that the way you speak shapes your destiny. Language is not just communication, it's creation. When you constantly say, I can't afford it, you program scarcity. When you say, I'll figure it out, you program resourcefulness. Wealthy people speak the language of abundance, possibility, and solutions. They don't deny reality, but they frame it in a way that empowers them. Words have power, and the words you repeat most often shape the results you create. And I got rich when I understood that vision without action is fantasy, but action without vision is chaos. You need both. Wealthy people hold a clear vision of what they're building, a vision that excites them, that drives them, that pulls them forward. But they also back it with relentless action day after day, without waiting for motivation to strike. Vision gives direction, action gives momentum, and together they create wealth. And I discovered that persistence is the great equalizer. Talent, intelligence, and connections can all give you a head start, but persistence is what sustains wealth. Most people quit right before the breakthrough. They endure the pain, the challenges, the setbacks, but when it's about to turn, they give up. Wealthy people persist long enough to win. They outlast the storm, they endure the discomfort, and because they stay in the game longer, they eventually win the game. And I got rich when I understood that certainty is created, not found. You don't wait for life to hand you confidence. You generate it by the way you move, the way you speak, the way you act. Wealthy people generate certainty in their body language, their tone, their decisions, and because they do, others trust them, follow them, and invest in them. Certainty is magnetic, and those who master it attract opportunities others never see. And I realize that the ultimate wealth is freedom. Freedom to live life on your own terms, to do work that lights you up, to spend time with the people you love, to contribute in ways that matter. Money is just the tool that makes that freedom possible. But freedom doesn't come from waiting. It comes from building the mindset, the habits, the systems, the resilience, the leadership. Freedom comes when you stop settling, stop waiting, and decide that your life will be lived fully, not halfway.